blood, and silence. That's what the ER smelled like after midnight. Antiseptic and copper, the perfume of survival. Riley Carter had learned to live with it. 3 years as a night nurse at St. Jude Memorial, and the metallic tang no longer made her flinch. It just reminded her that pain didn't sleep, and neither could she. She rubbed her temples as Dr. Amin slid a chart toward her. Curtain 4. Male, deep laceration, maybe a gunshot. Refusing a doctor. Just patch him up and get him out, Riley. She sighed. Of course. 16 hours into a double shift, her body begged for rest. But rent was due in 3 days, and saying no didn't pay the bills. So she gathered her supplies, pulled her tired curls into a bun, and pushed through the curtain into Bay 4. What she found stopped her breath. 3 men. 2 in black suits and dark glasses. Wrong for 2 a.m., wrong for a hospital. They stood stiff as shadows. Between them sat a man in an ivory shirt, the front soaked crimson. His jacket, tailored, expensive, lay folded neatly beside him. But it was his eyes that caught her. Cold gray, sharp, the kind of eyes that didn't blink when they looked at you. I asked for a doctor, he said, his voice low, touched with an Italian lilt. Smooth, dangerous, like a blade wrapped in silk. Riley steadied herself. You've got a nurse tonight. I'm just as good with a needle. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then a command, short and quiet. Leave. The 2 suits obeyed instantly. No hesitation, no questions. Now it was just her and him. She stepped closer, gloves snapping in place. Let me see the wound. He didn't move. He only studied her, the brown skin beneath tired eyes, the trembling hands she tried to hide. You're shaking, he said. 16-hour shift, she muttered. Comes with the badge. His mouth curved, almost a smile. You should take better care of yourself. She shot back. Says the man bleeding through a designer shirt. A soft chuckle slipped from him, low and rare. It did something strange to her chest. When he struggled to unbutton his shirt, she reached forward. Let me. He caught her wrist. His hand was warm, calloused, commanding, the kind of touch that told stories without words. Your name? He asked. Riley Carter. Riley, he repeated, tasting the name. You're not afraid. She met his gaze. I've treated gang members, dealers, and drunks who think money makes them invincible. You're just another patient. Something in his expression changed. Approval, maybe. Then treat me, nurse. She cleaned the wound, a clean slice across the ribs, deep, but not deadly. Beneath it, she noticed an older scar, a bullet wound that had healed long ago. This'll sting, she warned, pressing antiseptic. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just watched her with those storm gray eyes, as if memorizing her face. Where did you learn to stitch so neatly? He asked after a while. My grandmother, she murmured. She taught me to sew before I learned to write. She probably didn't imagine I'd use it like this. He chuckled, a sound like gravel and honey. Life rarely takes the path we imagine. Her hands hesitated for a second. She thought of her own path, the one that had ended 3 years ago when her fiancé died in a robbery she'd survived. She'd traded med school dreams for night shifts and grief that never left. No, she said softly, it doesn't. She tied off the final stitch, taped the bandage, and exhaled. That should hold, she said. Keep it dry, change it daily. Come back in 10 days for removal. He stood, and she realized just how tall he was. 6'3", maybe taller. The air seemed to change when he moved. I don't do hospitals, he said. He pulled out a thick money clip, peeled off several bills. Hundreds. Held them out. Riley shook her head. I can't take that. You need it. That's not how this works. He tucked the money into her scrub pocket anyway. Then consider it a fee. For your silence. Her throat went dry. The implication was clear. No reports, no police. Just a quiet exchange and a quiet night. He buttoned his shirt, his movements deliberate despite the pain. When he turned to leave, he paused. His hand lifted, brushed a stray curl from her face. Go home, Riley Carter, he murmured. Sleep. You've seen too much for one night. And then he was gone, just like that. The curtain swayed in his wake, and she stood there, still holding her breath. The money in her pocket felt like it weighed 100 pounds. The air around her smelled of antiseptic and trouble. As she cleaned the blood from the tray, her thoughts whispered like ghosts. Who was he? And what kind of man has bodyguards who move like shadows? She didn't know yet that by sunrise, that same man's name would echo through her life. And 200 of his men would surround her apartment. But for now, she just stared at the dark stain on her glove, the pulse in her wrist still racing from his touch, and wondered if she'd just treated a criminal, or something far more dangerous. And somewhere inside, a quiet voice asked, if danger looked like that, would I have walked away? Hey, before we continue, if you're feeling the story so far, please tap that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this with someone who loves deep stories too. And let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Now let's return to the moment everything changed. By the time Riley clocked out, the sky over the city had started to pale, a faint silver promise of morning after too many hours of chaos. Her body ached in that deep, hollow way that had nothing to do with fatigue and everything to do with him, the man with storm-gray eyes and blood on his hands. She walked home instead of taking the bus, hoping the cool dawn would clear her head. But the city felt different, too quiet. And 2 blocks from her building, she noticed it, a black SUV creeping along the curb beside her. Windows tinted, engine too smooth. She slowed. The SUV slowed. She sped up. So did it. Her pulse quickened, an instinct whispering danger. No, don't be paranoid, she told herself. You just stitched up a dangerous man. You're tired, that's all. But when she reached her building and glanced back, the car was still there, parked half a block down, waiting. She locked the door behind her, slid the chain in place, and stood in the silence of her tiny apartment. One room, one window, one fragile sense of safety. On the table sat the money he'd shoved into her pocket. $2,500 in clean, crisp hundreds. Riley sank into the couch, staring at it. Rent, groceries, grandma's care home. It could solve problems she'd been juggling for months. But something in her gut twisted. That money wasn't clean. It carried his scent, his power, his world. She pressed her palms to her face and whispered, "What have you gotten yourself into, Riley?" A knock on her door made her jump. Hard. She froze, listening. 1, 2, 3 slow knocks. Deliberate. "Miss Carter?" a man's voice called. "Riley Carter?" She crept to the peephole. A tall man in a black suit stood outside, hands folded politely. "Who is it?" she asked. "Mr. Moretti sent me. He requires your assistance." Her stomach dropped. Moretti. She didn't know his first name, but the way he'd commanded the room, she didn't need to. "You must have the wrong person," she said quickly. "You treated him last night," the man replied, calm, certain. "He needs you again." Riley pressed her forehead to the door, closing her eyes. "If he's hurt, tell him to go to the hospital." "That's not an option," the man said. "Please, Miss Carter. He sent a car. You'll be compensated for your time." Her heart hammered. "I'm not going anywhere with someone I don't know." There was a pause, then the rustle of movement, the man making a call. A moment later, a phone slid under her door. Sleek, black, expensive. It rang once. She hesitated and then picked it up. "Hello? Riley Carter." That voice, deep, smooth, familiar, wrapped around her name like a promise and a warning. "Mr. Moretti? I find myself in need of your hands again," he said. "The wound is infected. Then you should be at a hospital. We both know that isn't possible." His tone softened, but beneath it was steel. "I need you." Something in his voice made her chest tighten. It wasn't just command, it was pain. Real pain. "You have other doctors," she said, fighting to sound steady. "I trust your hands," he said simply. They didn't tremble, even when you were afraid. Her breath caught. Why did that sound more intimate than any compliment she'd ever received? She wanted to hang up, to forget him, his blood, his money, his shadow. But then he spoke again, quiet, almost gentle. "If you refuse, I'll have to find someone else. Perhaps another nurse at St. Jude's." Dr. Amin, was it? Her eyes flew open. He knew names. He knew everything. It wasn't a request. It was an order with polite edges. Riley swallowed hard. "Give me 15 minutes. "I'll be waiting," he said, and the line went dead. She stood there for a moment, phone in hand, feeling the walls of her small apartment close in. 15 minutes later, she was in clean jeans, her hair pulled back, her med bag slung over her shoulder. The same man from before waited in the hall, polite as ever, silent as a statue. He led her downstairs and out to the SUV. When she slid into the back seat, another man placed a blindfold over her eyes. "What the hell?" she gasped, jerking away. "Protocol," came the calm reply. "Mr. Moretti's residence is confidential." Her breath quickened. "This wasn't part of the deal. It's non-negotiable." The car began to move. She lost track of turns. Left, right, another right. The hum of tires changed from city asphalt to smooth stone, then gravel. Her sense of direction vanished. When the car finally stopped, someone opened the door, and cool air rushed in. Crisp, pine-scented, expensive. "We've arrived, Miss Carter." They removed the blindfold, and she froze. The mansion in front of her looked like something pulled from a dream. Modern, sleek, surrounded by acres of manicured gardens. Men patrolled the property, some armed, some pretending not to be. Riley's nurse brain whispered infection, fever, antibiotics. But her heart whispered, run. She didn't. They led her through marble halls lined with art that probably belonged in museums. The kind of wealth that had weight. Quiet, cold, absolute. When the door opened to a grand bedroom, her heart stuttered. There he was, Dominic Moretti. Even pale and fevered, he looked dangerous. Dark hair damp with sweat, those gray eyes dulled but still sharp enough to slice through her composure. His voice was weaker now, but it still carried that effortless command. "Leave us," he said to his men. "All of you." They obeyed without question. Riley set down her bag, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "You should be in a hospital." "And yet here we are," he murmured. "Help me, Riley." As she peeled away the soiled bandage, she saw how bad it was. Angry red tissue, pus, fever heat radiating off his skin. Her training took over. "You're septic," she said. "You need IV antibiotics, fluids. You might not make it through the night if—" "Then I'm fortunate you came," he interrupted softly. "How do you even know my name?" she demanded. He nodded toward the folder on the nightstand. "I make it my business to know those who touch my life." Inside were pages of her history, her education, her debt, even details about her grandmother's care home. Her stomach twisted. "You investigated me?" "I protect myself," he said calmly. "It's nothing personal." Her voice shook. "You had no right." He smiled faintly. "Rights are illusions in my world." Riley's hands moved on autopilot, removing the stitches, draining the wound, starting the IV. His blood burned against her gloves. For the next hour she worked, while he watched her, silent, unflinching, except for the occasional tremor when pain broke through his composure. When she finished, he was drenched in sweat but alive, his breath shallow, his eyes on her face. "You'll stay," he said quietly. "Excuse me?" "You'll monitor me tonight, in case the fever worsens." "I have a shift tomorrow. Call in sick." Her voice rose. "I can't just—" "You can," he said softly. "And you will." For a heartbeat, their gazes locked. His fever-bright eyes burned with something beyond command, something that made her pulse stumble. She sighed, defeated by equal parts duty and curiosity. "One night," she said, "then I'm gone." He closed his eyes, relief flickering across his face. Acceptable. As the IV dripped, she sat in the chair beside him, exhaustion wrapping around her like a blanket. At some point, he spoke again, voice rough with sleep. "Why did you help me, Riley?" She looked at him for a long time, then said quietly, "Because doing nothing would have felt worse." He smiled faintly, the first honest smile she'd seen. "There's always a choice," he murmured. "You just made yours." He drifted into sleep. Riley leaned back, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she whispered, "Yeah, maybe I did. And if you were in her shoes, sitting beside a man like Dominic Moretti, knowing he could destroy you or protect you with the same hand, would you have stayed that night or walked away?" Sometimes doing what's right isn't about the rules, it's about the heart. Riley woke to the soft crackle of firelight and the unfamiliar weight of silence. For a second, she didn't know where she was, until her eyes caught the view through the floor-to-ceiling windows. A lake, mountains, sunlight on glass, and the faint reflection of armed men patrolling below. The chair beneath her was butter-soft leather, not the worn fabric of her apartment. Then it hit her. Dominic Moretti, the wound, the mansion, the night. She straightened, her neck stiff from sleeping upright. The bed beside her was empty, sheets rumpled. Pillow indented. The IV line hung slack. Mr. Moretti? No answer. She checked the adjoining bathroom. Empty. A small panic fluttered in her chest. He was still weak. He shouldn't even be walking. As she turned back, her eyes landed on a folded piece of paper on the nightstand. Her name was written across it in bold, slanted handwriting. Riley. Business required my attention. Help yourself to anything you need. Marco will ensure your comfort. Do not leave the grounds. DM. Business, she muttered, setting the note down. Right. Because bleeding out one night and playing CEO the next is totally normal. She crossed the room, tugging open the curtains fully. Morning light flooded in, spilling across a view too perfect to be real. The manicured lawns, the glint of water, the luxury that screamed old money and quiet power. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten in nearly 24 hours. As if on cue, a soft knock sounded at the door. A young woman entered, carrying a tray laden with coffee, fruit, and something that looked like a chef's idea of breakfast art. She was dressed simply, dark hair pulled into a tight bun. Good morning, Miss Carter, she said with a faint accent. I'm Sophia, Mr. Moretti's housekeeper. He asked that I see to your needs. He shouldn't be out of bed, Riley said automatically. Sophia's expression didn't change. Mr. Moretti does as he pleases. Riley studied her. And you're not afraid of him? The woman paused mid-pour, then gave a small smile. Fear isn't always the right word. Respect, perhaps. Riley's gaze drifted to the window again, watching the guards pacing in quiet formation. Respect, she murmured. Right. After Sophia left, Riley sat by the window with her coffee. The taste was rich, expensive, almost sweet, but it did little to quiet the churn in her chest. What kind of man needed guards on every corner? And what kind of woman ended up here? Patching him together, sleeping in his mansion, pretending this was normal? She thought of her grandmother, of the last phone call where she'd promised to send money soon. Then she thought of the folder Dominic had shown her, the one filled with her entire life story, things she hadn't told anyone. A slow chill crept up her spine. He hadn't just found her, he'd chosen her. An hour later, she found Marco, the older man with steel-gray hair, in a wood-paneled study, speaking rapidly into a phone in Italian. His voice was low but carried weight. The kind of voice people listen to. He looked up when she entered. Polite but cautious. Miss Carter, he said, ending the call. You slept well? As well as someone can in a house that feels like it's watching them, she replied, crossing her arms. Where's your boss? Attending to business, Marco said simply. He's running a fever and a bacterial infection. What kind of business can't wait? The kind that keeps this house standing, he said almost gently. She frowned. You people really like talking in riddles. Marco offered a small smile. Sometimes riddles are safer than truths. Before she could respond, he nodded toward a door that led outside. Would you like some air? The gardens are beautiful this time of year. Riley hesitated, then followed him. Outside, the world was sunlight and stillness. The manicured lawn rolled down to a glittering lake, framed by pine trees that whispered in the breeze. Everything about it was perfect, except for the men. Everywhere she looked, suits, earpieces, eyes that never stopped scanning. You have a small army here, she said quietly. Smaller than usual, Marco replied. She blinked. That's comforting. They walked through a rose garden, the scent thick and dizzying. Marco's voice softened. I've known Dominic since he was a boy, he said. He learned early that to survive in our world, you build walls, around your home, around your heart. Riley glanced at him. And you? You just followed him into this life? Marco's eyes went distant. When his father was killed, I made a promise to keep the son alive, even from himself. They reached the edge of the lake. Riley crouched. touching the water, cool and still, like glass. "He's not just a man, is he?" she asked softly. "He's a man who carries too many ghosts," Marco replied. "And now, Miss Carter, one of them has noticed you." The words lingered like fog, long after they returned to the house. Later that afternoon, the quiet broke. Engines roared beyond the gate. Voices shouted orders. Riley rushed to the window. Black SUVs flooding the driveway, doors slamming open, men pouring out like a well-oiled machine. And then, through the chaos, she saw him. Dominic Moretti. He moved slower than before, pale, one hand braced against his side. But he moved with authority that made every man around him straighten. Even across the distance, his eyes found hers through the window. And just like that, the world outside went still. Her pulse stumbled, something tight and electric sparking in her chest. A knock sounded behind her. It was Marco again. "Mr. Moretti will see you in his study," he said quietly. "In 1 hour." Riley turned from the window. "Tell him I need to check his wound first." Marco hesitated. "Miss Carter, when you speak to him, choose your words carefully. Men like Dominic don't often hear the truth, but when they do, they remember it." She frowned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think you might be the first person he's listened to in a very long time." When Marco left, Riley stood there alone, her heart beating too loud, too fast. She looked out again, at the guards, the SUVs, the man who somehow commanded it all. It was surreal, terrifying, magnetic, and beneath it all, one thought rose like a whisper she couldn't silence. What if this is the moment everything in my life was leading toward? The wrong man, the wrong world, but maybe the right reason. Because sometimes, the people who crash into our lives aren't meant to destroy us. They're meant to show us who we really are when the walls come down. And I can't help wondering, if it were you standing in Riley's place, staring out that window, would you have felt fear? Or something dangerously close to fate? The study looked nothing like the rest of the mansion. It wasn't sleek or modern. It was old. Real wood, low light, the scent of tobacco and something faintly familiar, leather and rain. Riley stepped inside, the echo of her own footsteps louder than she expected. Dominic stood near the window, his back to her. Shirt crisp, but unbuttoned enough for her to see the faint outline of bandages. He didn't turn immediately. "You disobeyed my note," he said. "I told you not to leave the room." She crossed her arms. "You told me a lot of things. Most of them sounded like commands, not requests." He turned then, and for the first time, she saw something new in his eyes. Exhaustion. The kind that didn't come from illness but from fighting the world itself. "I don't command for pleasure," he said quietly. "I do it to stay alive." "You think that justifies controlling people?" "It justifies control of chaos." Riley shook her head. "You make it sound like you're saving the world," he smiled faintly. "Only my corner of it." She stepped closer, keeping her voice calm. "You're running a fever again. Sit down, please." Surprisingly, he obeyed. She checked the IV site, his pulse, the heat under his skin. "You're pushing too hard," she muttered. "Your body's not ready for—" "My body doesn't decide when business stops," her patient snapped. "Then maybe it should. You're human, not—" He caught her wrist, not roughly, but enough to stop her words. His voice dropped, soft but unyielding. "You don't understand, Riley. If I disappear, hundreds of men lose direction. Families lose protection. Blood fills streets that were once safe." Her voice trembled. "Protection? From what?" He released her, leaning back, the firelight painting sharp shadows across his face. "From men worse than me." The words hung there, simple, heavy, and terrible. Riley sank into the chair opposite him. "You talk like you're some kind of savior." "No," he said, eyes steady. "I'm the man they send to stop monsters. The difference is, sometimes I have to become one to win." Something in his tone, weary, unguarded, made her heart ache against her will. "Who did this to you?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then looked past her, through her almost. 3 nights ago, I met with a man named Vasily. We had an agreement, but he betrayed it. My men died. I was meant to die too." He touched his bandage. You kept me from that. Riley swallowed hard. So I saved a criminal. He smiled without humor. That depends on your definition of criminal. You run an organization, Dominic. Armed men, private estates. You're not fooling anyone. He chuckled quietly. No, I suppose I'm not. The silence between them stretched, thick with tension neither wanted to name. Finally, he spoke again. You should know something. The night I came to your hospital, that wasn't coincidence. Her breath hitched. What do you mean? I knew who you were before I walked in. Riley's voice broke. You... what? I needed someone I could trust with silence. Someone unconnected to my world. You fit both. You used me? He shook his head. I protected you. By choosing you. Anger flared. Don't twist this into mercy, Dominic. You turned my life into something I don't even recognize. Would you prefer I'd left you untouched, in your safe little world? His voice rose now, rougher. You were already drowning there, Riley. I just made you see the surface. That hit harder than she wanted it to. She stood abruptly, grabbing her bag. I'm leaving. You can't. Watch me. As she turned toward the door, 2 guards appeared. Not threatening, just there, waiting. Her chest tightened. You're serious? There's a price on my life, he said, his voice calmer now. Anyone connected to me becomes leverage. If you walk out that door, they'll find you, and they won't ask who you are before pulling the trigger. She stared at him, the reality sinking in like ice. You're saying I'm trapped. I'm saying I'm trying to keep you alive. Her heart raced. I didn't ask for that. No, he said softly, but I asked for you. The room went silent, so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. She wanted to scream, cry, curse him, anything. Instead, she whispered, You're insane. Maybe, he said, but insanity keeps me breathing. That night, she didn't sleep. She wandered the long hallways, passing portraits of men who all shared Dominic's eyes. Cold, powerful, unbreakable. Outside, she saw headlights coming and going, cars pulling into the estate. And somewhere in the distance, the faint echo of gunfire. When she returned to her room, something waited on the table, a small velvet box. She opened it slowly. Inside was a silver cross on a thin chain, simple and beautiful. A note lay beneath it, written in the same bold hand as before. You look like you needed a reminder that faith still exists, even in dark places. DM Riley stared at it for a long time. Then, almost reluctantly, she put it on. The metal felt cool against her skin, but beneath it, her heartbeat was too warm, too fast. She hated that she cared, hated that she wanted to believe there was something good left in him. And yet, she did. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the way he'd said her name, like it mattered. Or maybe it was something she couldn't explain, the quiet recognition between 2 broken people pretending they weren't. As she lay awake, she thought, maybe this isn't about saving him or escaping him. Maybe this is about finding out who I become when I stop running. And that quiet thought became a question. Not just for her, but for anyone who's ever been pulled towards something dangerous yet human. Do we fall for the person who saves us? Or the one who sees the parts we thought were unsalvageable? Sometimes it's hard to tell if a person is a warning or a miracle in disguise. If you were Riley, sitting in a mansion full of secrets, with the devil himself calling you his salvation, would you stay and see how the story ends? Or run before it's too late? For 3 days, Riley lived in a rhythm that didn't feel real. Mornings began with the sound of engines and footsteps outside her window. Afternoons with silence heavy enough to make her forget there was a world beyond the gates. And nights. Nights were the worst, because that was when Dominic would find her. He'd appear quietly, his presence filling whatever room she was in, always composed, always distant, yet somehow watching. Sometimes he'd ask about her day, sometimes nothing at all. But one night, when she found him alone in the library, the silence finally broke. He was leaning against the shelves, one hand braced above his head, breathing harder than usual. The fever was gone, but the exhaustion wasn't. You should rest, she said softly, stepping closer. Rest is a luxury, he murmured. You make everything sound like war. He turned then, his gaze landing on her. Because it is, Riley. Every day, every breath. Something in his tone made her chest tighten. You don't have to live like that. And what would you know of living any other way? The words stung, sharp and unfair. I know what loss feels like, she said quietly. And I know it doesn't have to turn you into stone. For a moment he just looked at her, the storm in his eyes softening. Then before she could think, he reached out, brushing a finger down her cheek. You shouldn't talk to me like that, he said. It makes me forget who I am. Then maybe that's not a bad thing, she whispered. And for the briefest second, the air between them changed. It wasn't the dangerous distance anymore. It was something fragile, electric, human. But before she could read it, Marco burst through the door, his face pale. Sir, we have a problem. Dominic stepped back instantly, every trace of softness gone. Speak. It's Vasili's men. They've breached the eastern perimeter. Riley's stomach dropped. Breached? You mean they're armed and closing in, Marco said. They're asking for the nurse. Riley froze. What? They know your name, Miss Carter. Dominic's jaw tightened. Get her downstairs, now! Before she could protest, 2 guards appeared and ushered her down a side hallway, Dominic right behind them. What's happening? She demanded, trying to keep up. You're the message, he said darkly. They're coming for leverage. Leverage against you? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. They reached a steel door that led into a corridor beneath the mansion. Dominic turned to her, his hand gripping her shoulder. Stay here. Don't open the door unless you hear my voice. You can't just do it, Riley. His voice cracked, not with anger, but something deeper. Fear. She hesitated, then stepped back as the door slammed shut between them. Gunfire erupted somewhere above, shouting, the sharp scent of gunpowder seeping through vents. She pressed her hands to her ears, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Every second felt like an hour, and then silence. Too quiet. Too fast. The handle turned. Her breath caught. Dominic? No answer. She backed away. The door swung open, and a man she didn't recognize stepped through. Bald, heavyset with a scar down one cheek. Miss Carter, he said, his accent thick. You've caused quite a bit of trouble. Riley's pulse froze. Who are you? Someone who's waited a long time to meet the nurse who patched up my enemy. He stepped closer. Do you know what happens to those who help Dominic Moretti? Before she could answer, a single gunshot cracked through the air, and the man fell, eyes wide, before collapsing at her feet. Behind him stood Dominic, smoke curling from the barrel of his gun, face pale and furious. He kicked the weapon away from the fallen man and turned to her. I told you to stay quiet. You left me alone, she shouted, shaking. What did you expect me to do? Hide under the floor? Yes. I'm not built like that, Dominic. Their voices echoed down the corridor, raw and wild. He stepped forward, gripping her face between his hands. His eyes burned with a mix of anger and something else. Relief, maybe. Fear. Do you understand now? He said, his voice breaking. This is what being near me means. Death follows. Always. Then why drag me into it? She whispered. Because I couldn't let them have you. The words hit her like a heartbeat too close to the edge. He released her, turning away. You should hate me for that. I don't know what I feel, she said, tears burning behind her eyes. But I know you don't get to decide what I do with it. Hours later, after the house had gone quiet again, Riley found herself standing on the balcony outside her room. The moon hung over the lake, silver and still. Below, men cleaned the aftermath of another night of violence. Above, her heart tried to make sense of the mess inside it. Dominic hadn't come to see her. He'd locked himself in his study, and though part of her wanted to hate him, another part, the reckless, wounded part, ached for the man who'd risked everything to keep her breathing. She touched the silver cross around her neck. The metal was cold, but her skin burned. For the first time, she wondered if maybe she hadn't just been caught in his world. Maybe she'd walked into it. Because love and danger weren't opposites. Sometimes they were the same thing, wearing different faces. And maybe that's what makes stories like this so hard to turn away from. The part of us that knows we shouldn't care, but does anyway. If you were Riley, standing on that balcony with blood still drying on your hands, would you call him a monster for what he did, or thank him for saving you? Maybe the real answer isn't about right or wrong. Maybe it's about why we stay, even when we know we shouldn't. The night air clung to her skin like a secret she couldn't wash away. Down below, the grounds were almost still again. Almost. Men moved quietly in the dark, clearing evidence of the violence that had just happened. Riley stood at the balcony railing, hands trembling against the cold metal, her mind replaying the scene over and over. The gunfire, the man's body collapsing, Dominic's voice shouting her name like it could pull her back from the edge. She didn't know if she was more afraid of him or for him. Behind her, the door creaked softly. She didn't turn. "You shouldn't be out here," Dominic said quietly. "Neither should you," she replied, her voice barely steady. "You just killed someone." He stepped beside her, his presence heavy but calm. "He would have killed you, and you didn't even hesitate. That's what survival looks like in my world." Riley turned toward him, eyes fierce. "Then maybe I don't belong in your world." He studied her, unreadable. "Maybe you don't." That silence between them hurt worse than the truth itself. She wanted him to fight for her, to say something, anything. But he didn't. He just stood there, the man she'd saved, now looking like someone she'd lost. Finally, she whispered, "I can't stay here, Dominic." "You can't leave," he said softly. "So I'm what? A prisoner?" "Protected." Her laugh broke, sharp and bitter. "That's what every jailer says." For a second, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or grief. But before he could answer, a voice echoed from inside the room. "Boss!" Marco stood in the doorway, his expression tight. "We have an issue. It's about her." Riley's stomach twisted. "What about me?" Dominic turned slowly, his tone low and controlled. "Speak." Marco hesitated. "The file from the hospital. Someone accessed it. A few hours before you were attacked." "Who?" "Your brother's men." Dominic's face hardened. "Vasily." Riley blinked. "Brother?" Marco's gaze dropped. "Half-brother. They share a father." She looked at Dominic, stunned. "You never said, because it doesn't matter. It matters if his men are trying to kill me. Why me, Dominic?" He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time, she saw something behind the walls in his eyes. Guilt. "Because he thinks you're leverage." "Leverage for what?" "To get to me." She shook her head, tears forming. "How?" "I don't even know you." "No," he said quietly, "but I know you, and I made sure he knew that too." Her voice caught. "You... what?" "I used you," Dominic admitted, voice low and raw. "That night at the hospital, I went there because I knew he had eyes on me. I needed him to think you were important. Someone worth following. It drew them out." Her hand flew to her mouth. "You set me up?" He stepped forward, desperate now. "It was the only way to find his people, to end this war. So you made me bait. I made you safe," he said, voice cracking. "Under my protection, they couldn't touch you." "Protection," she whispered, shaking. "You dragged me into a world I never asked to be part of, and you call that protection?" Dominic's jaw clenched. "If I hadn't, you'd be dead already." She backed away from him. "You don't get to rewrite this, Dominic. You lied to me. Every single thing between us. The money, the care, the connection. All of it was just strategy, wasn't it?" "No," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Not all of it." "Then which part was real?" He didn't answer, and the silence broke her. She turned and walked out before he could stop her. Riley found herself in the mansion's lower corridor, the one that led to the servants' quarters. The house felt like a maze, endless hallways of secrets she didn't want to know. Sophia appeared from one of the side doors, startled. "Miss Carter, what happened?" Riley's voice shook. "He happened." Sophia's expression softened with something like pity. "You found out?" "Found out what?" The housekeeper sighed. "That no one gets near Dominic Moretti without purpose. Even the ones he saves are chosen for a reason. So you knew? Everyone here knows, Sophia said gently. But that doesn't mean what he feels isn't real. What he feels? He doesn't even know what that means. Sophia looked at her for a long time. Maybe not. But he's trying. And for a man who's never had anything pure in his life, that's something. Riley's anger wavered. Just for a heartbeat. She walked to the end of the hall, stopped, and looked back up the staircase. Somewhere above her, she knew he was standing alone, probably staring into another glass of whiskey, pretending he didn't care. But she'd seen it. He did care. And maybe that made it even worse. The next morning, she packed her things. Sophia tried to stop her. If you leave, they'll find you. He can't protect you from that far. Riley zipped her bag. Then maybe I'll stop being his weakness. The drive back to the city was silent. Marco at the wheel, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the road. When they reached her apartment building, Riley opened the door. Thank you, she said quietly. Marco looked at her through the mirror. He never meant to hurt you. She nodded, forcing a thin smile. He didn't have to mean it. He still did. When she stepped out, the city felt too big, too bright. But at least it was hers. For the first time in days, she breathed without the weight of guards or gunfire. Still, when she reached her apartment door, her hand trembled on the key. Because she knew, you can't walk away from a man like Dominic Moretti. Not completely. He leaves something behind. A shadow, a scent, a heartbeat you can't unhear. And even as she closed the door, even as she told herself it was over, part of her wondered if she'd just walked away from the one person who'd ever seen her truth. Even if he used it first. Sometimes the hardest part of love isn't losing someone. It's realizing you were never standing on the same ground to begin with. If you were Riley, could you forgive him for using you? If you believed he did it to keep you alive? Or is love that begins with lies doomed to end with silence? For 3 days, Riley tried to rebuild her life. Tried to pretend the world she'd left behind. The mansion, the men, the danger, had been some strange, fevered dream. But reality wasn't comforting. Not when it was quiet enough for her thoughts to speak. Her phone rang twice that morning, numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored them. Then came the knock on her door. She froze. Another knock. Soft, patient, but firm. Riley, it's Marco. Her stomach dropped. She opened the door just enough to see his face, weary, eyes lined with sleepless nights. He's not well, Marco said. You should come. She shook her head immediately. No, I'm done being dragged into his chaos. It isn't chaos this time, Marco said gently. It's truth. She hesitated. What truth? The kind that can't wait much longer. Something in his tone made her chest tighten. Against every instinct screaming no, she grabbed her coat. The car ride was quiet. No music, no conversation. Just the hum of tires on wet asphalt and the low growl of an engine that knew the road by heart. When they reached the estate, the gates opened without question. The men at the post nodded silently. Inside, the mansion felt different. Dimmer. Still. Sophia met her at the door, her face pale. He's in the chapel. You have a chapel here? He built it after his mother died. Riley followed the hall until it opened into a small stone room bathed in candlelight. Dominic sat on a pew near the front, his hands clasped, the faint flicker of flame painting his face in amber and shadow. He didn't turn when she entered. You shouldn't have come, he said quietly. You sent for me. No, he corrected softly. I hoped for you. Riley stood behind him, unsure whether to scream or break. Marco said you were sick. He worries too much. She noticed the tremor in his hand, the strain in his voice. The fever was back. You need treatment, she said. I need forgiveness more. That stopped her. For what? He finally looked up, his eyes tired but clear. For keeping the truth from you. Riley's pulse quickened. Dominic, what truth? He gestured toward the small altar, where a single framed photo sat. It was old, faded. A woman with warm eyes and skin the same deep tone as Riley's, holding a little boy. Her breath caught. Who is that? My mother, he said. Riley blinked. Your half, he clarified. Before she died, she lived in Atlanta, for a short time. The words hit her like distant thunder, faint, but growing closer. He stood, moving slowly toward her. She met a man there, a soldier who was married but lonely. He never knew she had his child. That child was me. Her voice trembled. Dominic, what are you? She left me in Italy with my father when I was 7. I didn't see her again. Not until years later, when I found her name on a hospital form. He looked at her, eyes shining with something almost fragile. Her name was Angela Carter. Riley felt the world tilt. That's my grandmother's name. I know. No, that's not. She backed away, shaking her head. That's impossible. It isn't, he said softly. Your mother, Denise, was her daughter. My mother's half-sister. Riley's knees weakened. You're saying? We share blood, Riley. Not close, but enough. Her breath came shallow. You knew this? Not at first, but after that night in the hospital, I ran your name. When I saw it, when I realized who you were, he swallowed hard. I wanted to stay away. I should have. But something in me needed to protect what was left of her. She whispered, You used me because I reminded you of her. No, he said firmly. I kept you because I saw her in you. The strength, the kindness, the way you stitched me up without fear. Her heart twisted painfully. Dominic, this isn't something you hide from someone. I was afraid you'd run, he said, and I couldn't lose you. Not again. The truth hit harder than betrayal, because it wasn't cruelty. It was grief disguised as control. Riley sank onto the nearest pew, her head in her hands. Everything made sense now. The watchful eyes, the protectiveness, the way he looked at her like she was a memory he was terrified to touch. You should have told me, she whispered. Would it have changed anything? He asked quietly. Yes, she said, because then I'd know I wasn't just another one of your choices. The candles flickered between them, soft and unsteady. After a while, she asked, Why are you really sick, Dominic? This isn't just an infection. He hesitated. Then, finally, the truth came out like a confession. The knife I was cut with, it was laced. Toxin. Slow. My doctors can't stop it. Maybe yours can. Riley's eyes widened. You're poisoned? It's not lethal. Yet. Yet? He smiled faintly. Everyone dies from something, Riley. Some of us just know what's coming. She stepped closer, anger and fear warring in her chest. You waited this long to tell me? Because I didn't want you to stay out of pity. Her voice broke. You think that's why I'm here? He looked up, eyes meeting hers. No. I think you're here because despite everything, you care. And she did. God help her, she did. Her hands trembled as she reached for his. Then let me help. Please. Whatever time you have left, it doesn't have to be like this. He looked at her like she was light he didn't know how to hold. You shouldn't care for me, Riley. You're the last good thing in a life that's done nothing but break things. Then maybe, she said softly, it's time something broke for you instead of because of you. That night, she stayed in the chapel after he left, her thoughts spinning in circles she couldn't escape. Half family, half stranger. A man who'd lied to protect her, poisoned by his own past. Maybe redemption wasn't about being clean. Maybe it was about being known, and still being chosen. She ran her fingers over the silver cross he'd given her, feeling the cold metal warm slowly under her skin, and she whispered to the empty air, If I can't save him, at least let me understand him. Sometimes the people who hurt us aren't villains. They're just broken souls trying to love with hands that were never taught how. If you were Riley, and you found out the man who betrayed you was the only family you had left, would you stay and try to heal what's left of him, or walk away to save yourself before it's too late? The storm rolled in at dusk. Dark clouds gathered over the lake like bruises, and thunder rumbled through the valley, a warning of what was coming. Riley had barely slept since the night in the chapel. Dominic's secret sat in her chest like a ticking clock. Every second a reminder that time was running out for him. She'd spent the past day in his private medical wing, scanning lab results, sending tests to labs she could trust, trying to find a formula for the toxin. But nothing came back fast enough. The poison was spreading, and Vasily, his half-brother, was closing in. Riley stood at the window, watching as the sky darkened and headlights appeared in the distance. 1 car, then 2, then 5. The front gate lights flared. The guards tensed. Marco burst into the room. "He's here!" Riley turned sharply. "How many?" "Too many." "Then call the police." "We don't do that here," she exhaled sharply. "Then what do we do?" Before Marco could answer, Dominic entered, calm, dressed in black, a gun holstered at his side. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, but his eyes burned steady. "You're not ready for this," she said. "Neither is he," Dominic replied. He gave her a small smile, the kind that meant goodbye. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't do that. Don't look at me like you've already decided how this ends." He stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek. "Some endings are written before we even begin." "Then rewrite it," she said fiercely. "Fight to live, Dominic. For once, don't fight to win. Fight to stay." He hesitated, then leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers. "You shouldn't love a man like me." "Then maybe you should stop giving me reasons to." A faint, tired laugh escaped him. Then he turned and walked out, the door closing softly behind him. Riley followed as far as the stairwell, watching as he and his men took position near the entryway. The house seemed to hold its breath, and then headlights flared through the rain. Engines roared. Vasili's convoy stopped just beyond the gates, men spilling out in dark coats, guns glinting beneath the stormlight. The gates groaned open. Dominic stepped out first into the rain, unarmed but unyielding. "You came to finish what you started," he called out. From the shadows, Vasili's voice answered, smooth, mocking. "I came to take what you stole from me." "You mean everything our father built?" "I mean you." Riley watched from the window, her heart thundering louder than the storm. Marco stood behind her, ready, gun in hand. Down below, the two brothers faced each other like opposing storms. "You killed our father!" Vasili shouted. "He was killing everything else!" Dominic fired back. Vasili raised his gun. "And now it's your turn!" The world exploded into sound. Gunfire split the air. Men shouted. The smell of rain and smoke filled the mansion. Riley ran downstairs, ignoring Marco's shout. She reached the foyer just as Dominic stumbled through the doors, clutching his side. "Blood! So much blood! No, no, no!" "No," she whispered, catching him before he fell. "Stay with me." "It's nothing," he murmured, trying to stand. "I've had worse." "You've had enough." She dragged him toward the medical wing as the gunfire continued outside. The storm shook the walls. He winced, breath ragged. "Vasili's not here for territory anymore. He wants me gone, all of me." "Then let him want. You're not dying tonight." She tore open his shirt, pressing gauze to the wound. The blood kept coming. "You can't save me," he said softly. "Watch me." Her hands moved on instinct. Compress, stabilize, transfuse. The poison in his blood was still there, fighting her, but so was something stronger. Outside, Marco's men fought back. The house rattled with chaos, but inside that room, time narrowed to a single heartbeat. His. "Riley," he whispered, eyes glassy. "If I don't make it..." "Don't you dare finish that sentence." "If I don't..." He managed a faint smile. "Take what's left. The estate, the accounts. Use it to build something good, something I never could. You're going to tell me that yourself when you're alive, you hear me?" His fingers brushed the cross at her neck. "Keep that close. It's the only clean thing I ever gave you." She pressed harder against the wound, tears blurring her vision. "Please, Dominic, stay." He tried to speak, but the pain took his voice. And then, a gunshot. The door burst open. Vasili stood there, rain-soaked and furious, gun raised. Riley froze. "Step away!" Vasili snarled. "He's done!" "He's your brother," she cried. "He's a stain on our name." "Then maybe your name never meant anything," she spat. He cocked the gun. "Move!" And then, a second gunshot. Vasili's eyes widened. He fell. Behind him stood Marco, weapon steady, smoke rising from the barrel. The silence that followed was deafening. Riley dropped back to Dominic's side, shaking. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're okay. Do you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered. He reached up weakly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You should have run when you had the chance." "And missed this?" she said through tears. "Not a chance." He smiled faintly. "You're insane. You said that before. Still true. He coughed, breath shallow, and then, for the first time in forever, his voice softened completely. Riley, you remind me of everything I wanted to believe in. She leaned closer, her hand over his heart. Then believe again. His breathing slowed. She didn't stop pressing the gauze. Didn't stop whispering his name. And finally, the sirens came. Marco must have called someone, breaking his lifelong rule. As paramedics stormed the room, Riley clung to his hand, refusing to let go. The next time she saw him, it was dawn. He lay in a hospital bed, a real one this time. Machines hummed quietly, the morning light painting the room gold. He was alive, pale, bruised, but alive. When his eyes opened, the first thing he whispered was her name. Riley! She exhaled a shaky laugh. You really don't know how to stay dead, do you? Bad habit, he murmured. But maybe I finally found a reason not to. She smiled, brushing his hair back gently. Then, let's start from there. Sometimes love doesn't arrive as candlelight and comfort. Sometimes it's chaos and gunfire and choosing to stay when every instinct tells you to run. If you were Riley, holding the hand of a man who'd done terrible things but finally chose life because of you, would you call that redemption, or just a new beginning? 3 weeks later, the world looked different. The mansion still stood, quieter, lighter somehow. The scent of smoke and gunpowder had been replaced by sunlight and something that almost smelled like peace. Dominic Moretti was alive. He walked slowly now, leaning on a cane, the scar at his side still healing. Proof that even a man like him could bleed and survive. And Riley, she was still here. Not because she was trapped, but because she'd chosen to be. The first time he stepped outside after the shooting, she stood beside him at the edge of the lake. The reflection of water rippled under the morning light, gentle and forgiving. It's strange, he said quietly, watching the ripples spread. For years I built walls around everything I loved, thinking that was how I'd keep it safe. But walls just make you lonely. Riley smiled faintly. And lonely men make foolish decisions. He looked at her, one corner of his mouth curving. Like letting you stay? Like thinking I ever really left? For the first time he laughed, really laughed, the sound unguarded and real. It startled even him. They stood in silence after that, the wind playing with her curls, his hand finding hers almost without thinking. The touch felt right, simple, human. Later that afternoon, Marco found them sitting under the oak tree sharing a quiet meal from the kitchen, bread, fruit, and the kind of calm neither had tasted in years. The estate's secure again, Marco said, his voice softer than usual. Vasili's men have vanished. The families have accepted your retirement. Dominic looked up, eyebrows raised. Retirement? Marco nodded. Someone had to make it official. Riley smiled. You mean you forced him into vacation mode? I prefer the term survival mode, Marco replied with a wink. Dominic chuckled, shaking his head. It seems I'm surrounded by people who think they know what's best for me. That's because you finally let them care, Riley said gently. He met her eyes, and something in his expression softened. The same man who once spoke only in orders now listening to the quiet language of grace. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Riley wandered through the small chapel where they'd first faced the truth. The candles flickered again, just as they had that night. But this time the air didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. Dominic appeared in the doorway, leaning on his cane. You still come here, he said. I like the light, she murmured. It reminds me that even small flames can fill a room. He stepped closer, his voice low. And some flames burned steady enough to guide people home. She turned, smiling softly. Home, huh? Never thought I'd hear you use that word. He nodded, a small, earnest smile touching his lips. Neither did I. He pulled a folded envelope from his jacket and held it out to her. What's this? Paperwork. The deed to the free clinic in the city. It's in your name now! Her eyes widened. Dominic, I can't. You can. You're the reason it exists. I already transferred the funds. It's yours to build, to run, to heal whoever walks through those doors. Riley blinked back tears. You're serious? For once in my life, yes. She stepped forward and hugged him. Not the tentative kind of embrace that asks permission, but the kind that says thank you for surviving long enough to be human again. For a moment, he hesitated. Then his arms came around her, holding her like something sacred. You gave me a reason to live, Riley, he murmured. Now go, give that reason to someone else. Weeks later, the clinic opened its doors. It wasn't grand or polished, but it was alive. Riley ran it with steady hands and a patient's heart, the same heart that had once patched up a stranger and found something more than danger in his eyes. Dominic visited sometimes, always quietly, always early in the morning before patients arrived. He'd bring coffee, stand by the window, and watch her work. They didn't need to say much. Sometimes love didn't need grand declarations. Sometimes it was just showing up, again and again, until the silence between two people became peace instead of distance. One evening, as she locked the clinic for the night, he appeared beside her, still in black, but softer now. No guards, no shadows. How does it feel? He asked. Like healing, she said. Messy, beautiful, slow healing. He smiled, looking up at the fading sky. Maybe that's all any of us ever get. She turned to him. And what about you? What do you get? He looked at her for a long moment before saying simply, a second chance. Her eyes softened. So, what will you do with it? He took her hand, the city lights flickering across both their faces. Follow the only thing that's ever made me feel alive again. She smiled faintly. And what's that? He leaned closer, his forehead against hers, just like the night of the storm, and whispered, You. That night, for the first time in years, Riley slept without fear. Outside, the world was still chaotic. But for once, it wasn't her chaos. It was just life, and she'd learned to stop running from it. Because maybe love wasn't about finding safety at all. Maybe it was about finding someone who made the danger worth surviving. And in that truth, she finally felt whole. Sometimes the people who enter our lives in the darkest moments aren't there to save us. They're there to mirror us, to show us the strength we already had. If you were Riley, would you have stayed long enough to see the redemption behind the danger? Or do you believe some souls, no matter how broken, truly deserve their second chance? Tell me what your heart says, because maybe, deep down, we're all just looking for a story that reminds us love can still rewrite the ending, the I. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.